we can log in. I don't think we have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good morning, everybody. I can't tell, do we have a quorum?
James Cooper's just coming on.
Yes, and Mr. Ruiz just signed on as well.
Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we have a quorum. All right, then I'll call our meeting to order. I don't have any items and I'm not aware of any citizens to be heard. So I would have approval of our minutes of our August 7th board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
There's not one on prime meeting yet, but I'd make the motion.
All right, do we have a
And I would
second?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. All right. We only have 3 items on our consent docket. Are there any items that you'd like Jason to discuss before we approve the consent docket?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think they're all pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, if there aren't any questions, then I'd have a motion to approve our consent docket. And I see it's been moved and waiting on a second.
So Lisa, I am not able to see any opportunity to move, second, or vote on anything. In fact, it on my screen, it shows that it's approved.
Right. Me too.
Okay, so I apologize because I have a motion and a second from Maurice and a second from Councilman Cooper. And so you don't see the vote at all?
Okay, wait a
I
minute.
don't.
If I press escape, it goes to a voting screen, but it immediately disappears.
And then Lisa, on my screen, when I second it, it doesn't show who moved it. It just says waiting. So
Okay. Can we do a roll right now? Because I have it open, it's open, and then I'll close the vote. And I'm going to try the individual. I apologize.
On my screen, it does show the moved and seconded and the section where you can vote.
Yeah, I have all 30 as well.
I do too.
Very strange. Okay, so I'll take a roll call vote and then I'll manually push in the vote right now and see if it comes up on the screen. So Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Trustee Sempner,
Yes.
Trustee Bryant,
Yes.
Trustee Cooper,
yes.
Trustee Ruiz,
Yes.
and Trustee Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right. Our items for individual consideration, item A is a change order number 6 to the Convention Center parking garage. It's a decrease of $1,948. So I don't know if Jason, you need to say anything about that or not.
Corey's here to make a couple of comments on this one and the other parking items that are on the agenda. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I did just want to check with the approval of the minutes. I was able to see the votes that Lisa entered in, and I just wondered if Trustee Johnson and anyone else that was having difficulty seeing those votes, did you see them once Lisa entered them?
No, on the minutes, no. On the
No,
consent
the minutes,
docket,
no,
yes.
I didn't see it either.
Okay.
Okay, motion, approve. You know, that's what, okay. I hit the motion and so I think it's closing it, but I have a call for movers. Do you see a call for movers right now on your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll show a motion in a second.
Right.
So what I see is a call for movers, but no option for me to select that. I can tell that Brent moved and James seconded. I cannot see any opportunity for voting on either the moving or the motion.
And mine is the same way as Laura's.
And right now, we're still waiting for the vote to come up.
Okay.
Took a couple of seconds for the last one too.
All right. Let's see. Start the most save. Hold on a second. I'm going to call IT.
Can we just take a roll call on this one and move on?
Is that what?
Chairman, we can follow your preference, of course, if you'd like to do the roll call vote through the rest of the meeting. If the technology doesn't come online for us, we can. I mean, we have relatively few items compared to last agendas, so.
No, not block. And now I can't.
Unless we can get it up, let's just do a roll call and we can move on to the other items.
Okay, I apologize. Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sutner,
Yes.
Trustee Bryant,
Yes.
Trustee Cooper,
Yes.
Trustee Ruiz,
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes for item A. Item B is a request for proposal for bus stop refuge collection and removal. Approve the scope of work and authorize the administrator to advertise a request for proposals.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, trustees, yeah, this item here is, as mentioned, staff is recommending we issue an RFP in order to gauge the capabilities and really the costs within the local market to help us do a better job of trash removal at our bus stops. As you know, we've really made some significant efforts over the last few years to add bus shelters. Along with bus shelters, we're adding trash receptacles. And of course, although that's a great customer amenity, it is, of course, on the other side, causing a lot more work for us in terms of trying to keep up with the debris and the refuse. So we want to do a better job of that. And in order to do so, our current contractor is really having a pretty difficult time keeping up, mainly because of the exponential growth we've seen in the number of shelters and trash receptacles. Reminding the trustees that we added 100 shelters just in this last fiscal year alone. So what our plan is with the authorization of the trust is we'd like to issue this RFP, gauge the costs that are out there from the private sector, compare those costs to what we could potentially do by bringing this trash removal in-house, and then make a recommendation to the trust and how we move forward. But this would really be the first step in just kind of gauging, can the private sector do it for us and what the costs would be.
Well, we've been doing it in-house all along, haven't we?
Well, actually, there's a select number of bus shelters that we do in-house. The majority of the shelters in particular are maintained and repaired by our current advertising contractor, Tyler Media. But again, just with the exponential growth in what we've seen in terms of number of shelters, they're just not able to keep up. And I think, as staff, and I know I've heard from trustees as well, we want to do a better job in that area. So we're looking to increase the frequency of taking care of the trash at the bus stops.
Any questions by any of the trustees?
Jason, this raised a question I didn't think to ask during our agenda briefing. We're anticipating, more bus shelters over the next 8 to 10 years. Maps for would this same sort of whoever comes on here, would they be absorbing that work? Because as we add more and more and more.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, there's a couple of options we'd look at. I think a lot of it's just going to, be dependent on the order of magnitude, the number of new shelters and how quickly they come online. in that we may decide we want to issue a new RFP because we have a larger quantity and we may get more interest and more bids. At the same time, if it's more of a gradual type approach, and of course we don't know because the MAPS projects haven't been programmed, but if it's more of a gradual approach, we may just simply, add to this contractor, potential contractor, I should say, until we get to a point where we feel like we need to rebid it or go
Thank
out
you.
for another proposal, I should say.
Thank you, Jason.
Do each of the bus stops have a trash receptacle? I don't know that I've seen one at every bus stop.
No, the trustees' commitment in terms of having trash receptacles is at all of the new covered shelters. So the new covered shelters that we've been installing over the last probably 4 or 5 years that have the security lighting, they're also all being installed with trash receptacles. There are some bus stops with benches where we have trash cans installed, but typically our approach is when we install a new shelter, we make sure it has security lighting and a trash receptacle. So primarily just the bus shelters.
All right. I see Brent moved and Robert seconded. Let's take a roll call vote.
Unmute. Chairman Kaufman, sorry.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Sepner,
Yes.
Trustee Bryant,
Yes.
Trustee Cooper. Trustee Cooper? Can you hear us, Councilman Cooper?
Sorry, I muted myself.
Okay.
Yes.
And Trustee Ruiz
Yes.
and Trustee Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you. It passed. I want to make a note that even though we've taken roll call and I activated all the trustees, when I pull up the vote, it's showing that you're all absent. So I think that's why you're not displaying the vote. And so I manually put your vote into the system, but we have a call in to the city clerk's office to see if there's a way to fix that. I just want to let you know.
Who did you call, Lisa? Because Francis is on vacation today.
We're calling Mickey.
Okay.
We called it Amy Russell and she referred us to Mickey, just so you know.
If you close the vote, it should show.
All right. The motion carries. Item C is professional service agreement with Kensington Consulting for streetcar safety consulting services.
Mr. Chairman, I won't spend a lot of time on this one. If you'll recall, last month during the board meeting, the trustees authorized negotiations with Kensington for the consulting services that are listed here. So we've successfully negotiated that contract and we're bringing the contract now back to approval by the trust. Again, just as a reminder, this is consulting services primarily for support of our PTASP. That's our agency-wide safety plan, applicable now to the streetcar, but we're expanding it to the bus, and to support our annual audit with the state. And our audit is scheduled for September 22nd and 23rd. And so the timing on this contract is really beneficial for us, getting in place at the first of this month in order to prep for the audit later this month.
All right. Any questions? It looks like, at least on my screen, it shows where we can vote now.
Councilman, or sorry, Trustee Johnson, can you see the vote?
No.
Okay, so I show that everyone's voted except for you. So I'm going to manually, or do you, what is your vote?
I do vote yes on this item.
Okay, yeah, we have issues.
All right.
I can see the result of the vote. I just don't get an opportunity to vote. I don't get the circles that show, click here for yay or nay.
Okay, I'll relay that.
Okay, we're going to tell Mickey, and I think I might have her call you offline.
She'll need to call my cell phone. I'm at home today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the motion passed. Item D is a parking agreement with Candy Factory Loft for the Santa Fe Station East parking lot for 73 parking spaces. And this is, kind of an exciting to get the rent for that parking lot. So Jason, if you have any comments.
Sure, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Corey to make a few comments on this item, as well as E, F, and G. They're all parking related items.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Regarding this parking agreement with Candy Loft Factories, in working on this project, I've had a variety of people, almost 99%, ask me, where's this lot? So if you take a look at Exhibit A, you can get a visual, an aerial of where that lot is. It would be COTPA's first Bricktown parking lot that I'm aware of. So excited about that. It's just east of the train state of the raised railroad tracks. What's unique, a couple of unique things about this agreement is these 73 parking spaces as the lot currently sits needs to be evaluated for ADA compliance, and I'll take care of that. The leasee only has access to the parking spaces from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. That's important as it allows us to offer event revenue or offer event and transient parking to the Bricktown area. It is it has two-year extensions on the agreement, and the rates are controlled by CPI. So every year when we're looking at our current Omni agreement and this agreement, we'll look at CPI to make rate adjustments, assuming that the trust hasn't made any rate adjustments. Any questions I might answer?
No, Jason, are you going to comment on item E while we're here? And then we'll go back and take a vote on item D.
I was going to talk about item E. You want me to proceed with item E?
Yes, go ahead, and then
Okay.
we'll go back and take a vote on D.
Okay. So couple things about this. First thing about this memo is the terms are actually perpetual. They stay with the properties. It's a parking agreement with Boulevard Place, OKC LLC. That's the organization that's going to build the apartment buildings just north of our brand new garage. Excluding reserved parking rates, we would potentially collect $340,000 after the first 12 months of this agreement. Once the agreement's at 100% plus the reserved parking rates, as we need to label these rates, these spaces for the occupants, minimum $464,000 annually. The first year is in this agreement, they will pay as is, or as needed, I'm sorry. So the clock will start when they get their certificate of occupancy. They'll pay for what parking spaces are utilized. I'll mark those spaces at that time. After that 12 months, they have to pay the 264 spaces in its entirety.
All right, and then you might as well, Corey, just mention item F, the office space that we leased.
Okay, so this office space is currently occupied by Lanier Law. at the Arts District Garage. They're my neighbor. The lawyer that I worked with setting up the entire deal, from the build out to the terms, everything about it, is going to stay in that space. What has happened is he's been so successful, he's kind of outgrown himself and wants to go out on his own. There's nothing but an assignment from one group to another group that changes.
All right, thank you. Any questions on item D?
Yes, sorry. I was just reviewing the memo. Could someone walk me back through the history here? I saw in March where we had entered into the parking operations and management agreement, but I'm just, sorry, just a little confused on, I see the city will receive 30% compensation of net revenues, and then COTPA will retain the other 70. Where does Candy Factory Loft fit in here exactly? Like,
Okay. Yeah, so I can, I'm glad to answer Trustee Cooper. Sounds like it's kind of a two-part question there, the history, and then how does Candy Factory fit in? So the history, there's actually a very, very long history with this lot, but to summarize it, essentially, the city acquiring this lot was part of the deal that was put together to renovate the Santa Fe Depot. So with that renovation project, although the city funded most of the renovations, ACOG and ODOT were also both partners in that grant application and local match commitment for the renovation. And so part of ODOT's local match commitment, if you will, was giving that property, this parking lot, to the city. So it's took a considerable amount of time for that property transfer to occur. We have worked with Public Works, the municipal counselor's office, as you can imagine, a few meetings with ODOT. But to the point where we're at now, that property has been transferred, the city owns it. And then as we've done with a few other lots that are owned by the city or say the OCPPA, COTPA has then entered into a lease agreement, in this case with the city, to manage that lot. And then we will have a revenue share. So we have a lease agreement. We will do all the work, all the managing of the lot with the city owning it. I believe the split is 30%. The city gets 30, and then COTPA gets 70. And I don't have the memo right in front of me, so I'm doing that from memory, but can check if needed. Corey's given me the nod. It's 70-30. Yeah, and that's another good point. That is the net revenue. So after we pay all our costs, whatever revenue is left, we'll split it 70-30. So it's an entirely new revenue source for COTPA, additional spaces that we did not have in our inventory last year. So here's how the Candy Factory fits into it. The Candy Factory is, my understanding, is essentially a kind of a real estate investment company. The Candy Factory actually owns the building that is just east of this parking lot. In fact, I believe that building may be depicted on the exhibit that is in your packet. And so with the Candy Factory owning that office building, they need parking spaces for their tenants. And so they are basically purchasing all of these contracted monthly parking spaces for us, so their tenants that are in the building right next door have a place to park. So that's really where the Candy Factory comes in. It's them entering into this agreement so they have parking spaces for their tenants.
And thank you for that backstory. It's very helpful. And if I'm reading the memo correctly, they will have those spaces Monday through, I think it was Friday, certain time period. And then during the evenings and weekends, it's open to anyone who wants to rent there or rent or park there, and we would receive that revenue. Is that an correct interpretation?
Yeah, that is exactly right. And a nod to staff for negotiating that, because as Corey mentioned, that really kind of allows us to take our first step into Bricktown in terms of making, parking available to the public on weekends and during events.
All right. Then I would have a vote to approve item D.
Trustees, can you see the voting screen?
Oh,
No.
I think when I clicked off of it, when we went to the other item, I might have messed up the vote. So I'll do a roll call. Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Sepner,
yes.
Trustee Bryant,
Yes.
Trustee Cooper,
Yes.
Trustee Ruiz,
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Item E, which Corey addressed, and unless Jason or Corey have any additional comments, are there any questions from any of the trustees? If not, I'd have a motion to approve item E. It's been moved and seconded. Motion passes. Item F is an assignment of a lease agreement with Bradford and Wilson, that lease office space in the Art Center garage, and Corey has discussed that. So I see that we have a motion and a second. And the motion passes.
Excuse me. Before we move too far away from our parking adventures here, I have a request, and it goes back to item D. So I'm just staring at this map a little bit longer, a 3D satellite map of it. At some point down the road, when funds allow, I would be really interested in on Main Street and on Sheridan Avenue, the entrance into that parking lot. It looks like along the side of the road, it's just sort of this blank grass for both the entrance and exits there. And I've just been doing a lot of research these days on when a city has parking, having like shrubbery or just some sort of landscaping that for the pedestrian or the person on a bike or in a car, as they're moving past these things, it's not just like a surface level parking lot, but in fact, it's some sort of, there's landscaping. There's something that sort of covers, if you will, the parking. And again, I know we're in the middle of a pretty severe recession, but I would just want to put that in our heads, should funds ever become available, to really think about both Main Street and Sheridan and landscaping opportunities there, where I see, 2 green spaces over here on Sheridan and 2 green spaces on Main. I don't know if we were already thinking about that. I don't know if that's a possibility, but it's just something that's been on my mind lately.
I'm having a hard time picturing what you're referring to. Can you, which item is this again?
Oh, it's the Candy Loft parking lot, the surface level one, item D.
Oh, D.
D.
Sorry, it came to my head as we kept going through those items. So like if you look at both, it's kind of a rectangle, the surface parking lot, and on Main Street, the entrance, you have these 2 sort of green spaces that are, it seems just very much like flat grass, maybe a bush. And then you have it again on Sheridan. these 2 green spaces and maybe a bush. But when I do a quick Google search of like shrubbery around parking lots, I just see a lot of inventive, kind of landscaping opportunities, not too terribly expensive, but it's just something I would ask us to consider. Because for all intents and purposes, both of those, as someone is coming into Bricktown, walking east on Main Street or on Sheridan, these, whatever landscaping we could do along those entrances would actually enhance, someone's experience coming into Bricktown there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and we can certainly talk about that. I want to be careful that COTPA doesn't get into the landscaping business. The maintenance of landscaping is a little bit outside. I mean, we're already addressing the trash at the bus stops, and we need to make sure that we're serving our customers and being good citizens of Oklahoma City in terms of not creating waste. But I hate to expand us to having a landscaping maintenance unit also. So we will look into that and see what's available in terms of the downtown business improvement district, and maybe they can partner with us on some of that,
Okay.
like they did on the Project 180 improvements.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
All right, thank you, Laura. All right, do we have a motion to approve item F?
Chairman, we already took the vote for item F.
Oh, we did on F?
Yes.
Okay.
We should be on item G now.
Okay, but let me go back a minute, since Councilman Cooper's trying to put something in our head that we're going to have a parking committee meeting, and everybody might start thinking about what we're going to name the convention center garage. So you might just start giving some thought to some names you might have. And so when we have a parking committee meeting, we can discuss it. All right, item G is amendment to professional service agreement with HMS Ferries. And my understanding that Matthew Miller, president, and Mark Andrews, the manager, are available. If we could just have Jason briefly bring that up to date, and then I ask him to have Mark Andrews, the manager, give us a brief summation of the vessel caretaking and how they're going to take care of our boats while we're in this down period.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments on the amendment itself, and then yes, of course, we'll turn it over to HMS to talk more specifically about the caretaking responsibilities that they'll perform. Just as a reminder to the trustees, with Oklahoma River Service being suspended this year, it was necessary for us to amend the contract with HMS. And, HMS has been great partners with us. They've maintained and operated the river service for us, really ever since its inception. And so we are certainly appropriate to thank them for their participation in these negotiations and working to amend this contract so it works for both parties. Because I think both parties are certainly interested in future growth and development and hopefully, even expansion of service along the Oklahoma River. However, with this current year and the service being suspended, we are looking at this as a short-term suspension. So as we went into these negotiations, I think our objectives were, how do we make sure we can have a sense of continuity of operations and be able to stand the river operations back up in a very short time, at this point, maybe potentially, less than 12 months. But at the same time, acknowledge we're not going to be really running service, but we still have facilities and vessels that are going to need to be maintained. And so through the negotiations, what we had agreed to is essentially continuing to pay the management fee that is in the existing contract, and that would secure the staff and the expertise that we currently have throughout this next fiscal year, so that we have, again, those staff and those expertise for when we stand the river operations back up. And then secondly, rather than paying, normal operations, fuel, concessions, those kinds of things, when we're running the service, really what we're doing is we're paying basically just a kind of the bare essentials for maintaining vessels and facilities. And so those two pieces, the management fee and those caretaking responsibilities, we negotiated an estimated cost of $253,500 for 11 months of this fiscal year. You'll notice the contract amendment is retroactive to August 1st. So that is our estimated cost for maintaining the vessels, and again, putting ourselves in a position to be able to resume operations rather quickly. So I'm happy at this point in time to turn it over to either Mr. Andrews or Mr. Miller from HMS to talk a little bit about what they're going to do in terms of taking care of our vessels. Unless there's any questions, if the trustees have any questions on the contract amendment, I'm happy to answer those as well.
All right.
Mr. Miller or Mr. Andrews, or one of you on the call and would like to make a few comments on the caretaking services?
Yes, sir. This is Mark Andrews. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Mark.
All right.
Good to see you this morning.
Nice to see everybody. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, trustees. So I've had the privilege to be one of your captains for 10 of the 12 years that HMS has been working with you on this operation. And I'm just really glad that we can continue to fulfill our part of the bargain and that we can keep this operation in good shape so we can stand it up again. The caretaking exhibit, I think, is pretty straightforward. You'll see that it's basic vessel caretaking, and that we're going to be checking on the boats daily, making sure the bilges and mooring lines are checked and any corrective action taken, that the vessels are kept clean, that the key systems are started up to make sure that they're in good shape for when we want to get the service back up and running again, and basic safety inspections. Also taking care of the facilities, making sure they're kept clean and clutter-free, that we're responding to the alarms, the septic alarms, and all that's involved in that. On top of the basic vessel and facility caretaking, we're also going to be making sure we don't lose track of all of the regulatory items that are required in an operation like this. So there are more than 20 permits with more than 6 different agencies that have to be maintained, and we want to make sure we stay on top of those so we don't have to reinvent the wheel when this operation starts up again. And lastly, we're also going to make sure that the insurance on those vessels is maintained. So that's our basic caretaking package. And on top of that, we'd also be available for any maintenance items that came up, which would be additional and on top of that. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Any of the trustees have any questions? All right, Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve item G? I see we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. All right, motion passes. Thank you. Next item is ratification of payroll and vendor claims. Usually aren't any questions on that, but if there are any questions, we can take them now. If not, I have a motion and a second. And everybody vote. All right, it passes and we ratified our claims and payroll. Our financial reports, I know everybody received those yesterday by email, and hopefully had time to look. It's just 1 month into our fiscal year. The only item I had, and I'm sure Jason will address it, is the revenue on the transportation was certainly a plus, and he explained that to me. So Jason, if you'd like to, any mention on the financials?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll start with page 2, the budget to actual for the transportation operations. And if we could look at the revenues first, couple of revenue lines I'd like to direct your attention to, or I should say a few revenue lines. I did want to mention that if you look at the amount of revenue that we've collected through the fare box through the first month of the fiscal year, now this is just July, as the chairman had mentioned, if you look at fare box revenue, fare media sales, and then our Embark Plus fares, actual revenue to date is, essentially $20,000. Keep in mind, those numbers reflect a month where we were not accepting cash fares due to safety precautions. And as a result of not accepting cash fares, we were encouraging people to continue to buy the passes, but we know we didn't have near the pass sales that we normally do either, with ridership being down and so forth. So those are some really low numbers, probably the lowest numbers the trustees have ever seen for a month in terms of actual revenue. But I do remind the trustees that with your approval, we issued a half price pass sale in August, and Kristen's going to report the results of that half price pass sale. And then in addition, we began charging cash fares at the fare box on August 7th. So we should see a significant improvement for revenue collections through the fare box in August.
So Jason, can I ask real quick, if someone buys a pass, whether it's a day, week, month, whatever, does that show up as fare media sales rather than fare box?
Yeah, fare media sales.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. And you can tell by our budgeted amounts there that, even though we continue to promote and direct people to buying passes and using the online app, still the majority of our money comes in through cash. So we continue to work on that. So the other thing I would say about collecting fares now at the fare box is, again, in no way, shape, or form are we doing this in a less safe environment. Since we, suspended cash fare collection at the fare box, we now have, the mask ordinance in place. We now have the driver shield, the plexiglass driver shield installed on about a third of our buses. We received 41 additional driver shields this week, which will be installed, by this time next week, certainly. So all of our buses will be equipped with those driver shields, and then we still are requiring the masks. So anyway, thank you for letting me go into all that detail, simply talking about some revenues. But I just thought it was very important to state that we are collecting cash fares, but in a safe manner. The other thing I want to direct your attention to is the federal grants revenue, the FTA CARES reimbursement revenue. Based on recommendation from trustees, we broke both of those revenues out separately, and you can see both are on target for the first month of the fiscal year. And then really our outlier is the state government subsidy. We budget and receive about $1 million from the state every year. If you'll recall my comments last month when we were looking at the year-end financial, we actually showed not receiving, our full state subsidy. And that was because we received it from the state at the very end of June. It was deposited the very 1st of July. So of course, it's recognized for purposes of this report as a July revenue. So the $354,000 that you see actual year to date in state government subsidy is really a carryover from what we should have received in FY20. And that is the primary driver for why total revenues are in excess of our budget by about $340,000. Looking at the expenditure side of things, again, 1 month through the fiscal year, it's kind of hard to develop any kind of trend. We're basically on budget. And then through the first month of the fiscal year, our revenue, due primarily because of that state subsidy, has exceeded our expenses by $277,000. The next page is our Norman operations, and just a quick comment on this. Again, with the direction of the trustees, we were able to negotiate this year's contract with Norman so that we were able to basically do some billing for the services up front rather than being strictly on a reimbursement basis. And so that's why you see that through the first month of the fiscal year, we've already received $359,000 in revenue compared to, at least at the time of this report, under $100,000 of expenses. So that's giving us revenues in excess of expenses of $262,000. So again, that's basically eliminated us from being in that position of, fronting the costs and being reimbursed. And so we appreciate our partners in Norman working with us to get to that point. Page 4 is your parking operations, and just a couple of comments on that. You'll look at total revenues. We are basically on budget through the first month of the fiscal year, but again, I'll remind the trustees, the budget was reduced significantly for FY21 compared to previous years, and that is clearly evident when you look at event and transient revenue. Event revenue, in fact, we had no budget for this first month of the fiscal year, but we are tracking, at least at this point, on budget with revenues. The other thing I'll point out to you, and I know I've probably mentioned this every July, but just as a reminder, if you look at the parking garage operations line under the expenditure section, we have about $2.4 million budgeted. This is primarily the contract with Republic Parking Systems for management of the garages. And again, with this being a cash basis type budget to actual, we haven't received the bill for July services. We received that invoice in August and process it in August. So you'll see that first month of expenses actually show up on the August financial. So when you think about what we spend close to $200,000 a month for that parking garage operation contract. If you were to add that to our current expenses of $121, we would actually be about $43,000 more in expenses through the first month of the fiscal year than what we've collected in revenues. It's no reason for alarm at all at this point, because the other services and fees category there, the GC budgeted over $1 million. We very rarely spend that full budget amount. That's where our contingency and some other capital and consultant type contracts we budget that, we very rarely use that full budget authority, but we'll make sure we keep the trustees informed on that as we go through the year. I'll pass up on the river cruises and the Spokies operations. There's been minimal activity, and then finish up with some comments on the streetcar financial. This is page 7. And again, my comments will mirror what I had to share on the parking operations, in that if you look at the streetcar operations expenditure line of about $3.7 million for the year, you'll notice we've incurred no expenses to date through July. And again, that's because we received the invoice in August, and we'll process that for payment, and you'll start seeing those expenses in August. Again, thinking of how the parking financial discussion was presented, if we did add in those expenses that we incurred, which is about $308,000 a month for that contract, our revenues in excess of expenditures would go from 333 there that you see now to just about 26,000. So that is my comments for the first month of the financials, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions of any of the trustees on the financials? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, may vote. Yeah.
Chairman Kaufman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. We have 2 program reports, one community engagement and customer relations program update, and then a parking program update. So item A under our program, if we could receive that report. Jason, is somebody going to report on that?
Yeah, this is the community engagement report.
Yes.
Yep, I'm getting it pulled up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
And then I will turn it over to Kristen Torkelson to present the information.
Jason, you see we've got the parking services on the screen instead of the first one.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let's try this one. You seeing the customer service now?
No.
Not yet.
Okay, I'm trying it again. Here we go. How about now?
There we go.
All right.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you all. Okay. So obviously, community engagement looks slightly different in a pandemic. I will say that I am going to be giving a virtual lesson on how to use our bus system for remerge next Thursday. So that'll be kind of the first time that we do this virtually and not, in person or in the field kind of training. So that'll be interesting and fun. Okay, here we go. Okay, so in the month of August, we had 2 mask giveaway events. We had one in Oklahoma City and then one in Norman. These are all photos from our Oklahoma City event. We did it between 11 and 1. And you can see Councilman Cooper down in the bottom right-hand side. He helped us out. And then these are the photos from our Norman event. And we did this over a 3-hour period of time, just because there are fewer buses that come through. So we needed to extend that. So here are the totals that we handed out. Oklahoma City, we passed out 447. And then in Norman, we handed out 66 masks. Our plan is to have at least another mask giveaway event in each city. So more of those to come. And then last week, we had our half price sale. This was delayed slightly because, remember, we hadn't been accepting fares at the fare boxes, again, because of the pandemic happening. So a half price sale in August, at the end of August, and then we're going to have another one in December. Here are all of our numbers from last week. This is our bulk sale total. It was $27,086. And then you can see the breakdown for all of the specific programs that purchased some passes. A big one that we do is the Oklahoma County Drug Courts. You can see that total there. They purchase them every year. And then these are all the passes that were sold at the actual transit center. Keep in mind that we are still at limited capacity at the transit center. So we can have 6 people in at a time. We have people monitoring the doors to make sure that everybody's following all of the rules. So I'm going to show you the amounts from 2020 versus 2019. You can see a little bit of a difference, but here are the daily totals from last week. So if you look at the bulk sales, they were pretty close, but the transit center sales were down, and we anticipated that because of limited capacity. So I'm curious to see what happens in December if anything changes, but those are totals for the last couple times. And now, I'm sure you all remember my streetcar job was to do all of the fun community engagement pieces on that. And that is starting up again with the BRT. So I get to do that again. I'm very excited about it. So one piece of this are the right-of-way acquisitions. So I put together, I'm sorry, I did not put this together. I did not. I've added an exhibit for you to see. Keep in mind that these are 30% completed, so this is still a draft. But part of this is that I will be meeting with business owners and or property owners, whoever would like to meet with me, to discuss the entire project and then the right-of-way, which you can see highlighted in the yellow and it's circled in red. And so then I, with Jesse Rush, will be working with Public Works and probably Coates, because that's what we did with streetcar as well, to secure any additional right-of-way that is needed. And keep in mind, sometimes this is just a matter of like, you know, you're constructing the stop and we need to have some sort of like construction equipment on that piece of right-of-way. So maybe that won't, like the actual property won't change. We just need access to it. And then the other piece of this, there are a couple of driveways throughout the project that might be conflicting with the property, I'm sorry, with the project. So we'll sit down with the business owners and the property owners to talk about the driveway closures and where the station stops are gonna go. And then, you know, how their parking lots will flow in the future. So we'll work through all of those details. And that is all I have. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I just wanted to say thank you for all of your work.
Very welcome. Happy to do it.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and do the parking update, then we can receive our program reports.
Give me one moment just to pull this up, if you would. Sorry. No, thanks, I got it. I mistakenly clicked on the wrong item. All right, today's parking committee report. This presentation will contain large amounts of concrete, just to be aware. We've made a lot of progress on the project.
Or we can't see anything. I don't see your presentation.
Oh, my apologies. Jason, I am gonna need help, I think.
May just need to share screen there.
Can you see it now?
Nope.
No.
There we go.
Got it?
Got it.
Yep, there's some concrete.
All right. So you can see in this image that we are starting to, or we have the that garage door, that small garage door is how pedestrians will access the future mixed use space. Fire department is required a fire rated door. So that door will be equipped with a heat sensor of sorts in case there's a vehicle fire there or something with a large amount of heat. That door will automatically close and lock. All of the doors, there's about 12 doors in the entire garage. All of them are independent, so we don't have the worries about a fire on the first floor and the 6th floor door closes. So that was designed appropriately. This fire rated expansion joint was included in the change order that was approved. We had to change the vertical expansion joint in this area to a fire rated product. So there was an increase, but we got a big decrease in the change order approved. Oops. Expansion joints are being installed, the horizontal expansion joints throughout the garage. Here we are, this piece of red equipment is actually throwing small BBs against the floor of the garage in order to roughen up the deck that is above the office spaces on the first floor so that we can put that weather resistant sealant to ensure that water doesn't seep into the ceilings of the office space where lots of electrical equipment is. You can see that we're mostly have built out all of the frontline employee office areas. This is where frontline employees will get punch in, punch out, get their equipment and their supplies that they need, and then return all of those products at the end of their shift. Throughout the entire garage, the storefronts are being installed to the staircase system. This just happens to be a picture of our main staircase, the southwest staircase. Office furniture is moving into the management offices. As of yesterday, the carpet and all of the tiling was done. Bathrooms still need work. And then I mistakenly left this image in there. That was our vertical cables, which are all now installed. The vertical cables, I will tell you, we're having to tension them all to the same tension because when winter comes, the cables will contract. And if they're not at the same tension and one contracts more than the other, then the tiles could get out of alignment. So we've devised a system to actually tension those within 5 pounds, I think it is. And so that's underway. Our tiles are not going to be 100% ready and installed before final completion of December. We'll be able to utilize all of the parking garage minus a few spaces to complete the art, plain and simple. The product that's used to make the tiles is also used to make plastic shielding. And there was a lot of that gone out to assist the COVID situation. But again, we'll be able to open up the garage for public use as we've already spoken about. Any questions?
Any questions of Corey? All right, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Would then receive a motion to receive our program reports. We have a motion and a second. Everybody vote. That's passed. We received our program reports. All right. Any items from the trustees before we adjourn? Any questions any comments from Jason?
None today, sir.
Well, that's a first. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Everybody have a great Labor Day and mask up COTPA since we're mask up Oklahoma City.
There we go.
Everybody be safe and take care. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.